Kate and Tom work together to create a situation in which a misunderstanding is seen as a threat to their relationship, and they both demonstrate their willingness to support their relationship by modifying their talk. The modifications are based on a mutual awareness of the possibility of misunderstanding arising from a self or other judgment about their competence in English. And the judgment may be formed prior to their conversation based on a belief about the link between English language competence and their nationality or ethnicity. And this in a way follows Indu's experience, where she was prejudged before she opened her mouth and before she spoke. And some of you might have come across similar situations. Kate and Tom bring 4 elements to this situation: a mutual willingness to create and sustain a relationship, the belief in the negative role played by misunderstanding in relationship building, and a prior and ongoing judgment of each other's competence in English as an international language, and also the willingness and ability to modify their style of interaction. And our results were that these 4 elements is a pattern of interaction trying to minimise local trouble by using extended question sequences.
Okay, thank you, Robert. And as Robert looking at the side of misunderstanding, the one that I'm looking on is about kind of native speaker and non-native speaker identities. And I know that conference we mentioned these 2 words quite often, but as we are using the conversational analysis, you can see from the screen, and there is a quotation from Huang. He says that conversational analysis focuses on showing how someone does being a non-native speaker. So before we analyze our data, we didn't see Tom or Kate either as native speaker or non-native speaker. But as you can hear and you can read from your handout, we can find that Kate, when she was talking, she shows out to be more self-confident. She shows out to be more fluent in using English. And also, she always jump out and help Tom for some standard words or pronunciation that she thinks is right. And then on the other side, Tom, you can see his voice is lower. And when I was doing the transcribing, I need to so much concentrate on what he's talking about. And then, so he feels to be less self-confident, and also he made an excuse for his linguistic deficiency. Whereas, another question that I put here is it always like this every time? I surprised myself too much times today during that conference. You know, when I was listening others' presentation, I found that when I close my eyes, I can't imagine who is talking there. The lady with a very, very great English with American accent. But when I open my eyes, I find that it's quite different from what I'm thinking about. So we don't think native speakers should be behaved like this way and non-native speakers should be behaved like that way. But we are constructing our identities during the conversation. So let's hand to Rachel, who will give us something about the teacher and student identities.
Thanks, Jing. So as Tracy said, I was interested in teacher and student identities and how these were constructed in the talk. You can see in the transcript that Kate uses the story of Tom's English language learning to set the scene for a diagnosis of his needs. Of course, outside the framework of this interview, Tom might claim or be assigned the identity of an English language learner, or he may prioritise his national identity, his religious identity, his identity as a fan of a certain type of music or sport. And what we're all interested in here in this research group is how these possible identities are called into relevance in the interview and what use they serve in the interaction. So having positioned Tom as a student right at the beginning of the interview by asking him about the history of his English language learning, Kate then uses this student identity as a context for her question about his difficulties with English, and you can see that at the beginning of the transcript. Tom's acceptance of his student identity is crucial to Kate for a successful needs analysis interview. And in general, you can see that Tom is willing to co-construct a student identity and allow Kate to take the position of teacher. Kate takes teacher-like control of the interview by nominating topics and by using the initiation, response, feedback or follow-up structure that's very common in a classroom talk. You can see at the beginning in line 43 there's the initiation, 46 is Tom's response, and 47 is Kate's follow-up or feedback with OK, followed by another IRF pattern. Another way in which Kate controls Tom's identity is by trying to provide explanations for difficulties that he's had. The first one is where he said it was difficult to understand his teachers in China, and she comes up with an explanation which he modifies. He doesn't accept her explanation, but he modifies it by introducing other variables that she hasn't suggested. And then again, at the end, Tom's problems with grammar. Kate's explanation is Chinese grammar is different from English grammar. Initially Tom accepts it, and then look, he modifies it again. Not really, some, half and half. At the end, Kate tries to sum up in a foreigner talk she's got going there. Quite difficult, listening quite difficult. Will you okay with that? And again, Tom contests this identity, this positioning that Kate's doing in the interview by saying, I'm not sure. He's making relevant his experience with varieties of English. He's an experienced learner, he's an experienced listener to varieties of English around the world. And here he's making relevant his experience of English as an international language. He is a user of English as an international language.
Okay, at this point of our presentation, we would like to cite Rajagopalan, who in this quotation reinforces English as an international language. He, when talking about the linguistic phenomenon of world English, talks about the shifting status that the native speaker teacher has had to undergo with the emergence of world English. Rajagopalan describes a native speaker as an individual who is brought up in a monolingual household with no exposure whatsoever to other languages. He describes world English as a language that is spoken across the globe, as a language that has flourished in leaps and bounds outside the inner circle countries. So what Rajagopalan is trying to highlight here is that although traditionally American and British English were considered the standard varieties of English to be taught within the EFL classroom, and the native speaker teacher was regarded as the EFL professional, this is no longer the case. In his own words, Rajagopalan says that world English is nobody's mother tongue. Therefore, as Kanagaraja points out in this quotation, world English has become a lingua franca or a contact language for others.